The Red Scare and purge of suspected communists dominated much of American life during the 1950s. But there was another scare of a different color unfolding largely behind the scenes, one that saw thousands lose their jobs simply because of their sexual orientation. In 1953, President Dwight Eisenhower ordered the firing of gay and lesbian federal workers amid fears they could be blackmailed by the Soviet Union. That fueled a witch hunt that lasted for decades and helped ignite the modern gay rights movement. We're looking back at this period in our nation's history, which is now the focus of a documentary airing on PBS called The Lavender Scare. Here's a look.
We have your friend in the next room. She's already told us that you're gay. You give us the names of others and we'll go easier on you.
The untold story of a vicious witch hunt.
Tens and tens of thousands of people fired from or kept from jobs.
And the courageous few who fought back.
It ended up becoming something much larger. It was about the rights of all gay men and lesbians.
The Lavender Scare.
And joining us now is Josh Howard, the director of The Lavender Scare. Josh, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Now, Josh, your film is fascinating and a very important story. But I have to confess that it's a story I didn't know anything about, and my bet is that a lot of Americans don't know much about it either. Why is that, if I'm right?
Well, I didn't know anything about it either. I came across a book called The Lavender Scare by David K. Johnson, and I was amazed reading this. It's a story that has not really been told. The reason is that when this was going on, the people who were being fired, the gay people who were being fired, didn't want to tell others, the friends and family, future employers, why they had been fired, because they were in the closet and they had to get on with their lives. After some initial publicity about this, the government didn't want to talk about how many homosexuals were being fired, because the question became, well, why had you hired them in the first place? Sure. So it became an embarrassment to the government. So it was really this conspiracy of silence, and over the years, tens and tens of thousands of people were fired.
And it took you 10 years to do this film. Did you engage in this odyssey because it was such an important but little-known story?
Well, that's why I wanted to embark on the project. It took 10 years because it was tough to find the financing for it, frankly. We would raise some money and shoot an interview and raise a little more money and do some editing. Not the most efficient workflow, but we eventually did get it made.
So listen, the purge of gays and lesbians from the federal government and the military as well, back in 1953. The justification was, as I said in the introduction, the fear that gay and lesbians could be blackmailed by the Soviet Union or an enemy power. Was there any justification for that? Was there any evidence that that was successfully happening?
There wasn't a single case. When this happened, they couldn't come up with a single example of this. And even in retrospect, there's never been a single case of a gay man or lesbian submitting to blackmail by a foreign agent. But you could argue that there was some basis for this because our government itself was blackmailing these people. When an agent would have someone in front of them, they would say, confess, resign, go away, or we're going to expose you. We're going to tell your family and friends and future employers. So in event, our own government was blackmailing people.
Wow. By the way, most of the outings, I don't know exactly what the word would be, of the gay and lesbians in the federal government were by anonymous sources, by confidential sources. Do we know who these people were?
Not necessarily. And certainly the people who were accused didn't know who they were. You were not allowed to face your accuser. You were called in, put under oath, not given the opportunity to have a lawyer, because these weren't criminal proceedings. These were administrative proceedings. And a large number of people didn't even bother going through the interrogation. When they were told they were being called in because there was evidence that they were gay, they just went in and resigned.
So how long did this last? And do we know how many people were affected by this?
Well, the policy of denying security clearance to gay men and lesbians was in effect until 1995. It was President Clinton who reversed the Eisenhower executive order. And it's impossible to know how many people were affected. There are certainly the records of people who were fired. Then there's some records of people who resigned, and if you look at the personnel records, you can get a sense that they were under investigation. Yeah. But we'll never know how many people were denied employment because during preliminary background checks they were found to be gay. the number of people who never applied for jobs because they knew that they were going to be found out. The government required private companies doing business with the government to fire their gay and lesbian employees. No way of ever knowing how many people there were fired. And through NATO, we demanded of our NATO allies that they conduct purges in their countries as well.
And did they?
And they did.
Oh. So, you tell this larger story largely through the lives of individuals who illustrate the story. There's one amazing character featured in your film, Frank Kameny. Amazing guy, important as could be, also never heard of him. Tell us a little bit about him.
Frank Kameny was working for the U.S. Army Map Service. He had a PhD in astronomy from Harvard. He was brilliant, single-minded, determined, and he was at work one day, and two agents came in and said, "We have evidence that you're a homosexual. What do you have to say to this?" And he said, "What's the evidence?" And they said, "We're not going to tell you." And so he said, "Well, I have no comment." But the fact is, he was fired because he was gay. We estimate probably 5,000 people had been fired or forced to resign before Frank. He was the first person to stand up and say, "This is wrong. This is no reason that I should lose my job." And he began an effort to fight this policy. And he fought it administratively. He fought it through the courts. When no lawyer would continue to represent him, he filed his own brief to the United States Supreme Court, which wasn't granted. But he embarked on a lifetime.
And he fought it on the streets. He organized, I think, the first demonstration of gay and lesbians outside the White House, at least in Washington, right? To protest this?
Exactly. It was
4 years before Stonewall.
1965. He got 11 people together to picket in front of the White House. Stonewall is obviously a major event, milestone in the history of the movement. But one of the reasons I wanted to make the film is really to pay tribute to a small group of very brave people who, years before Stonewall, really got the ball rolling.
And we got about a couple minutes left, but I want to talk about Joan Cassidy. She's an example of the fact that even if you did not get fired or were forced to resign, your life was damaged as a result of this policy. Talk about her a little bit.
Joan Cassidy came from a naval family. Her father, her mother, both of her sisters and brothers were all in the Navy. And she wanted to be in the Navy too, and she did enlist, and she rose to the rank of captain in the Naval Reserve, which is the highest rank a woman has ever held in the reserve. But she was offered the opportunity to go for admiral. She would have been the first admiral, first female admiral in the U.S. Navy. And as she told us in the film, she thought about it, and she thought, but what if, when I go for that, they discover what I've been hiding all these years? And so she gave up that opportunity. And as you say, it's a great example of how this policy was so widespread and affected so many people in so many different ways.
So what are the lessons of this dark moment in our history for us today?
Well, when I started working on the film, I really saw it as a moment in history. And now I really see that there are broader messages to it. The homophobia of the 1950s was a direct backlash against an earlier time that we talk about in the film, in which being gay wasn't such a big deal. And I think it's Mark Twain said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And I do feel that we're in something of a similar time today to the 1950s. We've made enormous progress in the fight for equality over the past decade and more. But there is an ebb and flow to history, and we already see some of the progress we made beginning to erode a bit. Yeah. And so I think that is an important message of the film.
Well, Josh, the film, The Lavender Scare, airs here on PBS. Thanks so much for joining us today to talk about it.
Thank you very much.
And just a reminder, for more on how to watch The Lavender Scare, head over to our website at metrofocus.org.